Hello and welcome to Film Teach, Self-Education Through Films. If you're interested to know how films can be used to improve our understanding of everyday concepts and phenomena in a useful way, this audio essay series is for you. My name is Disha and I study one film at a time to distill from it practical and useful insights. Today's audio essay, the 8th one on the channel, is inspired by the film Whale Rider. A bittersweet film that has many things to teach us, like the limitations and purpose of tradition, the agony of change, the combined power of love and resilience, compassion as strength, and all of these, in their mellow and extreme permutations and combinations, as the film shows, can lead to a happy ending. I hope to explore all these ideas in the essays to come, but to start with, I have chosen to understand the concept of tradition as seen and experienced by and through the character of Koro in the film. I felt that in his intense affiliation to his tradition, Koro had as if come to embody certain aspects of it. It seemed to me that Koro had become one with his understanding of the Maori tradition, and I felt that in studying aspects of his character, perhaps I can understand certain aspects of tradition itself. So the question I decided to pursue was this: what can we learn about tradition from Whale Rider's Koro? For me, this was one of the most important questions I had asked myself on Film Teach so far. In fact, in the end, it became more personal than I ever thought it would be. You see, it kind of rejoined me with my own tradition, the ancient source that waters the ocean of my existence. My attempt to understand tradition fundamentally gave me a sense of belonging and took away the idea that one can ever feel truly lonely. It became the bridge that connected my own past and present with the past and present of my culture, my tradition, and in some sense, the tradition of the world, and invoked a sense of intimacy and gratefulness that was frankly lacking in my earlier understanding of tradition. As I studied Koro, his connection with his ancestors, his commitment to what he considered his duty towards them, and his willingness to sacrifice everything for it, I started to see tradition as a tool of guiding and directing one's self to one's purpose. Along with this, it also became clear that Koro's connection with his tradition was limited to his sense of duty towards his ancestors. He confused the performance of the ritual with the meaning of the ritual, and in doing so, restricted his tradition's applicability and intensified his own suffering. Before we get to the core matter of today's essay, I think it's important for me to ask the listener to keep in mind that every time I use the word tradition, they can replace it with the name Koro in order to not get locked up in what tradition may mean to them. With that out of the way, it's time to share the insights I discovered about the nature of tradition as embodied by the character of Koro. Here we go. Insight number 1. Tradition is governed by a set of rules. One gets a sense of what Koro is like quite early in the film. In one of the first scenes, he seems to completely overlook the fact that his son had just lost a wife after giving birth to a dead son, and expects him to start over again in order to get the male chief he, Koro, had been waiting for. This was a difficult scene to watch, and when mixed with Koro's love for his son and his sincerity in what he expects from him, it felt harder to understand what it could mean. However, what I could understand made me think of tradition as something akin to science, in that both are governed by a set of rules. But while rules take science forward, they tend to hold tradition where it is. It made me think of science as a kite that leaves the certainty of ground and gravity to fly and explore the skies, and tradition as the person who stays his or her position on the ground. They both govern each other's movement, and in turn are governed by laws that allow the person to stay on the ground and the kite to flitter across the sky. Insight number 2. Tradition keeps focus in check. For Koro, no event about the ancestors was insignificant enough to be overlooked. For instance, in the short scene where everybody is gathered in the community hall for the concert and one of the kids makes a silly sound that cracks everyone up, it is Koro who brings attention back into focus. This observation made me think of tradition as a stern guardian that does not forget the context of an assembly or a ritual, despite distractions, and that its sense of focus urges and inspires others to stay in line. Insight number 3. Tradition does not express itself through words alone. In the scene where Pororangi comes to see the concert, the father and son meet each other after a long time. Here, left to themselves, Koro displays his maturity and understanding by letting his son take his time to get comfortable. He doesn't use many words to say so, just waits patiently while his son overcomes whatever awkwardness he felt inside him before embracing his father. This made me think of tradition as a set of ideas that have our back, and that sometimes its silence can be louder and more comforting than its words. It is not the kind of silence that means absence, but the kind that means the presence of safety and love. Insight number 4. Tradition can sometimes be too unyielding and blind for its own good. I have come to think that Koro chose, although unconsciously, to ignore his granddaughter's innate intelligence and warmth. He does not acknowledge when she returns instead of going away with her father, scolds her for sneaking in to learn the ancient ways, and overlooks her superior skills with the Tayaha, only to finally realize that she embodies the very spirit he has been trying to appeal to. This insight made me wonder if some of the more perilous actions taken in the name of tradition are but the result of a vehement refusal to accept change, and on insisting on being blind while groping in the darkness of one sort or another, and also if it's this refusal to change that attracts pain, conflict, and suffering for itself and others. Insight number 5. Tradition does not like its authority challenged. It expects and demands complete surrender. In the scene where Koro is trying to fix the motor of the boat while telling Pai about the history of their people, he gets enraged when the rope he thought useless was fixed by Pai. While as a grown-up he has a right to warn her of the potential dangers, Koro, it seemed to me, was more upset by Pai making his decision to discard the rope look like a hasty one. As a devoted grandchild, Pai only attempted to make her Koro happy with her work, and I wondered why Koro did not pat her on the back while still reminding her to be cautious. This made me think that tradition, as embodied by Koro, does not take kindly to being challenged. Tradition, with all its knowledge, but without its wisdom, may err into believing that it's infallible. It may get blinded by the halo of light it puts around its decisions. As a result, tradition might attract a torrent of opposition or a crude realization, as was in the case of Koro, that it isn't all-knowing like those it worships and looks up to. Insight number 6. Tradition does not take kindly to disobedience and challenge. It can come to believe that whoever challenges it is dangerous. This insight grew from the last insight. The course of action taken by Koro when he sees that Pai had fixed the rope he considered useless also made me wonder if he considered this as an act of micro-rebellion by Pai and wished to nip it in the bud. If this was so, then Koro, in embodying tradition, shows that tradition does not only disdain challenge, but also considers the challenger dangerous, capable perhaps of disturbing the structure that tradition claims and believes itself to be the protector of. It made me feel that tradition may be opposed to ideas that it thinks have the potential to dislodge its authority or force it to change its ways. And Koro, who seldom smiles in the film, is troubled by his granddaughter constantly coming in the way of his work and beliefs. In truth, however, I felt that Pai unknowingly was challenging him to expand the horizon of his thought and daring him to see tradition beyond ritual. Insight number 7. Tradition does not shy from imposing. This insight dawned on me in the scene where Koro almost forces Pai's teacher to meet his son. In his bid to restore what he had lost when he lost his grandson, Koro took it upon himself to set the course of Pororangi's life without his permission or any knowledge of his son's personal life. This made me wonder if tradition imposes rules, regulations, and actions in the name of the greater good, and that in its obsessive understanding of what is right, comes to believe that others see life from the same lens as well. Insight number 8. Tradition is a teacher. A teacher is many things. A reminder of fundamental truths is one of them. This aspect of tradition revealed itself to me in the scene where Koro is deeply upset with his son Pororangi for enjoying his privileges but forgetting that, quote, he's also got the obligations, unquote. Koro's love for his community and culture was the result of his knowledge of the past and his immutable reverence for it. Perhaps he held the sufferings and wisdom of his ancestors in the deepest regard and considered them as the best way to keep the Maori culture and spirit alive in young hearts. This insight inspired another one in which I saw Koro, Pororangi, and Pai as 3 aspects of a teacher and also as 3 methods of teaching. Koro, I felt, taught by emulating a known past. Pororangi, by experimenting with an unknown future. And Pai, by emulating and experimenting simultaneously. Insight number 9. Tradition possesses the capacity to change when the intelligence of the heart overcomes fear of punishment. Koro was rigid because his interpretation of the myth had no room for change. It was solid as a rock, not free like water. This lack of malleability in his understanding made him sacrifice more than he could ever imagine, which was the near death of his granddaughter. This incident perhaps took away all the fear Koro had in his heart regarding not fulfilling his duties towards his ancestors. Once he overcomes the fear, he changes and confesses his short-sightedness and ignorance to Paikia and also to the spirit of his ancestors. When he asks for their forgiveness for his rigidity, he says, quote, "Wise leader, forgive me. I'm just a fledgling, new to flight," unquote. His heart, once heavy with fear and guilt, is made light with truth and is rewarded with little Paikia coming back to life. This made me think that tradition, like the rest of existence, is subservient to change. The more tradition denies that which is right in front of its eyes, in the name of protecting that which is always transforming, it stands to attract unnecessary suffering, it seemed to me. This insight made me think of tradition as a means of protection, for it helps us know where the boundaries may lie, and also as a place of growth, as it can tell us what it takes to cross sacred ground and even prepare for what may lie beyond it. Insight number 10. Tradition is a set of methods to help individuals, societies, and the world at large handle eternal obstacles. The mythological story of the original Whale Rider is a story of surrender and faith. In it, Paikia surrenders himself to the faith he had in the ancient ones to keep him from drowning. In the end, his faith is rewarded and his life saved. The story had been passed down from generation to generation among the Maoris. It had kept alive the spirit of Paikia around them and within them. For Koro, the story was a composite of, quote, all the qualities of a chief, of strength, courage, intelligence, and leadership, unquote. And it was his duty to pass on this story and its practical and ephemeral merit to the young ones so that the Maori ways weren't completely lost to the changing times. Renowned late Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Carl Gustav Jung had this to say about the connection between myths and culture. Quote, "One is forced to speak not of what is held in common between the cultures, but what is held in common between the myths, and that in its simplest archetypal forms." Unquote. In every culture, myths of strength, courage, intelligence, and leadership exist and help maintain a connection to the past. Although the form and language of mythological stories may differ, their essence and intention seem to be the same across the world: to provide a ground to stand on for all that is new and yet infirm. This realization warmed my heart and affirmed the fact that whenever the challenges of the present pull the carpet from beneath our feet, the firm ground of myths and tradition will always be there for us to stand on. The overarching question allowed me to go beyond the virtues and ills of tradition, and even perhaps beyond its necessity and irrelevance. It allowed me to see what tradition, or at least aspects of it, as embodied by Koro, may contain and lead to. As always, there were glimmers of light and traces of darkness, acts of order and chaos, and just as always, there was room for transformed and hopefully more matured interpretations. It also gave me a sense of coming from and of being connected to something that has survived wars, opposition, self-degradation, hubris, in order to protect deeper, richer, and life-sustaining ideas. The hardened shell of tradition seems to carry within its heart a nurturing attitude towards the fragility and beauty of life. It also made me think of tradition as a lover who is so committed to protecting his or her beloved that in doing so, he or she forgets to engage with the beloved altogether. It forgets that what it loves is alive and transforming and strong in its wisdom, and that protection is only one half of the duty. Engaging is the other. Before I conclude, here is a summary of some aspects of the nature of tradition that I felt were embodied by the character of Koro in Whale Rider. 1. Tradition is governed by a set of rules. 2. Tradition keeps focus in check. 3. Tradition does not express itself through words alone. 4. Tradition can sometimes be too unyielding and blind for its own good. 5. Tradition does not like its authority challenged. It expects and demands complete surrender. 6. Tradition does not take kindly to disobedience and challenge. It can come to believe that whoever challenges it is dangerous. 7. Tradition does not shy from imposing. 8. Tradition is a teacher. 9. Tradition possesses the capacity to change when the intelligence of the heart overcomes fear of punishment. 10. Tradition is a set of methods to help individuals, society, and the world at large handle eternal obstacles. So this is what I found out. What about you? Add your insights in the comments section, and if you found the essay useful, do share it with your friends, and maybe let me know too. Thanks for being here. See you next time.